Today we are here at the annual AccelerateOTT, and we are truly excited. If you're watching this, we are sitting down today with some of the key speakers, influencers and entrepreneurs that's here today. Now with me, I'm very fortunate because today is going to be a special edition because I am also, apart from having some great speakers here, joined by my co-host for today, which is the CEO and partner at Momentum Law, Megan Cornell. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for the invitation. We're really looking forward to this.
Absolutely. And today we are going to really showcase some of these amazing individuals. There are so many today, so we're going to squeeze in as many of them as we possibly can. And this gentleman right here, which is the managing director of Minstrel Venture Partners, Code Cubit, we dragged him off the stage pretty much to come and join us here today. So thank you so much for joining us, Code. We are really excited to have you here as our first guest. And I'm going to let Megan kickstart things off. We've got lots of questions to ask you. We have a little bit of time. Let's go.
Great. Okay, Code, I know that our early stage clients would really like to hear from you on two things. One, if they're coming to pitch to you guys, is there an early warning sign or anything that makes you take a little step back and be really cautious with that particular company? And then on the flip side, is there something that immediately draws you in and builds trust and kind of encourages an investment in an early stage company?
Sure. So another way to frame it is, what are we looking for? And I think it always comes down to the team, especially at the earliest stages. Entrepreneurship is hard, innovation is hard, starting a company from zero is very, very hard. And so we spend a lot of time evaluating the team. And we're looking for transparency, openness, willingness to learn, willingness to recognize what they don't know, as opposed to, yeah, we know everything and we're going to win for sure. Second, obviously, is the market. It's the big driver of success, highest correlated factor. And so is it a market we're interested in, and is this a team that we really want to back and spend the next 5 to 10 years with?
Yeah. And just a follow-up question on that point, on the transparency. I know with particularly really early stage companies, often there will be challenges in the initial team, the initial founders. And we always encourage our companies, of course, to set up in a way to migrate the team as safely and quickly as possible. That being said, sometimes they're really cautious and reluctant to share those team changes. And so that's something that you look for is transparency, and if there has been early team changes, you're not necessarily going to look negatively on that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can't expect the perfect founding team right out of the gate. I think the secret power of a good startup is to surround themselves with advisors who have expertise in the areas that they lack. But look, we've seen literally thousands of companies, and we've seen it all. It's sort of like your doctor. You can take your clothes off. We've seen it before, and we're not going to get excited or upset about the good and the bad.
Now, I love that. And, a key thing about even in your company's name is that, just you hear venture and you hear venture capitalist, you think money. And any company that's watching this is thinking, okay, am I in the right sector? Am I doing the right things? Am I in the scope of these venture capitalists? So maybe I should ask you, what sector do you feel is getting a lot of attention and why?
Sure, you can start with some numbers. So we do IT broadly. IT globally is about a $4 trillion business. $1.5 trillion of that is telecom infrastructure. Another $1 trillion is services. Where we care about most is software. Software of the $4 trillion is only about 10%, 400 billion. And then within that, there's a category called SaaS. And SaaS is a common term, but it turns out it's only a $60 billion market globally. We think that market will grow to 200 or 300 billion over the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years. And so we focus exclusively on enterprise SaaS software. And what does that mean underneath it? It's the technology enablers that make it grow. Things like artificial intelligence, things like blockchain, things like AI. These are essentially math tools that are available today because we have high-end computing, and that makes the software smarter, and that makes enterprises smarter and more efficient, and that's where we focus.
Beautiful. And just the communications that you've had with other venture capitalists. Now, I know you have offices, globally for that matter, and you are consistently in that conversation. Maybe you can share with me a little bit, what do you hear about them in general, about potentially investing in companies here in Ottawa? And we're making a splash, but what are you hearing through the grapevine?
Sure. Well, I'll start out a little more broadly than that. So we have offices in Palo Alto and in Los Angeles, but our headquarters is here in Ottawa. And we do 80% of our investments in Canada. and roughly a third of our investments so far were Ottawa-based. I can tell you over the last 6 years, in fact, we just did this study, 6 years ago, about half the rounds that were done were accompanied by US investors, 50%. Last year, it was over 80%. And so that means in the almost $4 billion that was put into this category last year in Canada, 80% of those rounds included US investors. So there's no question that the world is waking up. US investors are coming to Canada. We have massive amounts of leverage in things like SHRED and OCE and FedDev. I can go on and the statistics. But there's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur in Canada. Ottawa absolutely bats above its weight class. We've got deep sector domain experience and expertise in telecom, in e-commerce, in security. There's no question that we're very well positioned.
Fantastic. Well, for those of you that's watching this, thank you very much for joining us. We are here today at AccelerateOTT, and you're watching Techopia. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's such a pleasure in having you, and it's so nice to know that we have a Ottawa-based venture capitalist like yourself that's really, just proponing Ottawa and promoting us and making sure that the world knows about us. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Hey bro, go for what you know. Bass getting low and we rock the show. Hey bro, go for what you know. Bass getting low and we rock the show.
We're back here with our next speaker. If you're watching this, we are at AccelerateOTT 2018. It is a phenomenal event. It is bringing together a slew of entrepreneurs and great speakers. But today, we are sitting down today with some of the key speakers, influencers, and entrepreneurs that's here today. Now, with me, I'm very fortunate because today is going to be a special edition because I am also, apart from having some great speakers here, joined by my co-host for today, which is the CEO and partner at Momentum, Megan Cornell. Thank you so much for joining me today, Megan. And of course, our speaker that we're featuring here today, such a well-known entrepreneur in the city, CEO of Ascent Compliance, one of those companies, once again, that is making a lot of noise. Andrew Waitman, thank you so much for joining us. We are going to touch base a little bit today about all the amazing things that you have done, but I'm going to pass it over to Megan to kickstart things off.
Yeah, and your talk, as we just grabbed you off the stage, was fantastic, telling the really unusual story of moving from investor to operating a company. It's exciting, for sure. Lots stood out in your talk for me, but one of the things I wanted to explore a little bit more was the key ingredients you put forward to really scaling, because that's what we're here talking about today. And two of the words that you said really stood out, and that was integrity and intensity. And I know that a lot of the early stage startups that are listening to this are probably intrigued by those two words. And how do you implement them? How have you grown them as a team? And you can tell us that story a bit again.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. So obviously we talked about the importance of people in the progress of a company, and one of the things that I hire for was not where we were, but where we were anticipating going. And so in that discussion, we're talking about, obviously everybody knows you hire for technical skills, and what I mean by that is, do they understand digital marketing? Do they understand how to organize and run a sales team or develop the product? So these are technical skills which, if you don't have what you need, you're not hiring them, okay? But what I've learned over my career, and what I've put a lot more attention during the recruiting process and built cultures to put, okay, is these two terms which you picked up on. And let's deal with intensity first, okay? Intensity is, if you're trying to grow a company at outlier speed, unusual speed, it is not for everyone, okay? You need people, okay, who really I live to work, okay? I love what I do, okay? I love what I do. And so I have a family, I have little kids, but my passion is about building business. So my intensity is, and a lot of people meet and go, "You're intense," right? So the thing is I need to see that in the people. And when, you know, how do you get to that? You look at what they've done in their past, okay? You look at how, you know, how achievement oriented they are. You look at how goal driven they are. You look at what things they've achieved in their life that, whoa, that's intense, okay? And you look at the intensity even in the meeting. What's the energy and the intensity in the meeting, okay? The other thing, integrity, you know, integrity is what people do when nobody's watching, okay? That's what it is. And that's a tougher one. It really is. That's probably the one you're going to make more mistakes on. I made mistakes in my career. Various people, and you know, it takes time to really see. It takes tough moments to really see how people act, you know, towards others when, you know, not obvious decisions need to be made, doing the right thing. Okay, so I would say integrity is the toughest piece to do in an interview process. And, you know, you obviously have questions that try and get to what would you do in that scenario,
yes,
you know, but ultimately what people say and how they behave, okay, and how they behave takes time to figure out. But what I would say is I've spent a lot more energy on looking at that intensity piece and that integrity piece. The technical piece is important. Don't make a mistake. You need the technical skills, but ultimately a company succeeds if it's got that intensity and integrity there.
Wonderful.
Okay?
That's I love it, and your energy is so contagious, and I think that is why Ascend Compliance have really made such amazing progress in such a short space of time. And you know, I think Megan, once again touching on the aspect of just growing and scaling. We know that, you know, a Series B funding was quite huge that you received last year. That meant a lot for the company and it pushed you forward. But I want to ask you more so, what is the biggest challenge in dealing with such a scale? And, you know, how did you manage that? And, you know, that's really what I think a company like you have done really, really well, is managing that process.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. It's actually a very you have to put context around scale.
Yes.
So our context is we are attempting to sell to the largest companies in the world in aerospace and defense, in electronics, in medical instrument, okay? You know, we just won, I have to be careful with names because they're all recognizable.
Yes.
So, but we just won, you know, I'll just say a $5 billion company who spent 2 years evaluating us.
Wow.
So part of the issue, when you have very large companies evaluating you, you have to pass security requirements. You have to pass capability requirements. You have to pass expertise requirements. What money does, and we could not be where we are today without that large round in several aspects. One is our regulatory team, okay, so the team of experts, which other companies come to us for because they're not going to have those guys on staff, are critical. They're global. We have folks in Europe, we have folks in the United States, we have folks in Canada that have the kind of buzz or lead understanding of what the key regulation issues are, okay? So that's important. But the biggest thing in speed is if you're going to build an enterprise product, like Kinaxis has an enterprise software product, but they built it over 20 years. I have 3 years. And the demands from our customers are enormous, and we're not in the custom software business. That's not our business. We're in the configuration business. But to win them, they want to be able to do everything that they can do with their Salesforce for CRM. Totally configure it to their Snowflake ideals, okay? So we have to get that capable fast. So money is time. So you have to implement a product at enterprise scale with enterprise security, with enterprise quality, with a UI, UX, and all the features and functions they want at a ridiculous speed. And it has been tough on our team, okay? I'm not saying it has been tough. We have many. Last year, we were nearly on the edge of burning a lot of people out, okay? Long hours and weekends, on and on and on and on. So it was very tough. But what money enabled us to do was get to that level we needed to be. July 16th is a very important date for us, okay? It's a big, big company milestone. And with that, because you always oversell a little bit, okay, you always do, a bit more promising, we're closed that gap dramatically. So, and Q2 has been a dramatic success. So we've also used that money to invest, because there's a lead time investing in marketing programs and in sales team. They have to be up to speed and understand what you're doing before they're effective. So in order to maintain our speed, you need to be able to hire people, you need to be able to run marketing programs all ahead of time, because the sales have sales cycles, okay? And a sales guy or gal needs to be knowledgeable about what they're selling. So everything is about speed, and and there's a lot of puzzles, and we are still in the pursuit and grind business. We're not in the respond business yet, but we are doing very well.
Wow, that's
so I was going to ask, how do you keep up the intensity in a 2-year sales cycle? But I think you've actually just answered that question. So back to you, Carlo.
No, I think, and this is pretty much what, we can talk to you all day long. I mean, Andrew, you are such a leader in your field, and your company is such a leader in what they do, and you have so much dedication, and that is why we wanted to take some time with you today. So I really appreciate you taking some time with us. For those of you that's watching us, make sure that you stay tuned here, because we have some great individuals that want to showcase. Andrew Waitman, CEO of Ascent Compliance, and of course my co-host Megan Cornell from Momentum Law. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you soon. Amazing slew of speakers and interviewees we have for today. If you're watching this, you are watching Techopia at AccelerateOTT 2018. I'm here with my co-host Megan Cornell from Momentum Law, and we are fortunate to sit down with Elizabeth Yin from Hustle Fund. Thank you so much for joining us today. Co-founder, and of course, once again, a lady that is doing so much for entrepreneurship and also engaging and embracing and supporting this whole ecosystem. So I'd love to hear a little bit from you. There is so much happening just within business these days, and especially someone like yourself. I'd like to hear a little bit what you're thinking with regards to Canadian companies and silicone companies, and how they stack up against each other, and what is happening, what is people saying out there, and what is your approach to that?
Well, thanks so much for having me. So I think that, as a vast generalization, the Canadian startup ecosystem is an overlooked gem. Okay. And so that's why I'm here. Actually,
okay.
I even have my Ottawa
I like that.
on.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You can hold over that.
Well, so I think there are a few things. One is just characteristics. The US and Canada are very similar. Maybe you guys don't want to be similar to us anymore, but very similar culturally. We all speak English. Business is done in a very similar way. So I think those are similar. But I think in terms of some of the details, I mean, certainly you guys have more vibrant support up here. Your shred credits, we don't get any help down there. Cost of living is better. I mean, even in a place like Toronto, where people complain about the living expenses, it is not nearly as high as San Francisco. But I think in terms of quality of entrepreneurs, we have great tech talent up here just as well as in the US and Silicon Valley in particular. But I think there are a couple of things that are different, which is that I see a lot more scrappiness up here, and almost out of necessity, because there is less money going around. And so therefore I think people actually think about things from a business perspective, as a vast generalization, like, how do I make this work as a business, rather than how do I go and raise 50 million bucks? And I really actually like that, because at the end of the day, while raising money can be an important part of the journey, it's not the end all be all.
Wonderful.
So let me ask a question that sort of follows on the heels of that a little bit. In Canada, you mentioned our shred credits, but we've also fairly recently gotten a real focus on funding female companies, female-led companies. And is that a trend that you're seeing in the U.S. and in Silicon Valley? And in particular, how, do women founders go about looking for money or asking for money in a different way?
Yeah, I think it is a trend in both the US and Canada, and I think that that's a good thing. I think that previously there were a lot of opportunities that were overlooked, and we're starting to also see some real unicorns proving that women can build big companies, like Stitch Fix in the US just IPO'd, which is amazing this year, and the founder's in her 30s. And so I think that that's a great trend, but I would say that it is still very challenging for women. I mean, actually, as a weird generalization, I've seen that if you have two female co-founders of the same company, it is actually really hard for them to raise money. It doesn't really matter what they're working on. I think investors make an opinion about you when they meet you in the first, 5 seconds. And for whatever reason, people still feel like, as an unconscious bias, that, oh, women cannot build big companies, when that's just not true. It's very personality driven and individual driven. So I hope that as we start to see more data points, we will change those numbers in a bigger way, but I think it is still very challenging.
Now, just to kind of once again add to the investing in the industries and the sectors that is of note these days and people are paying attention to. Maybe you can share with us, we just had Code step in here and share with us a little bit some of the sectors that he feels is taking a lot of the attention. But hearing from your side, where do you feel some of the key sectors are where investors are looking to kind of get their hands into?
Well, certainly blockchain is one of them. I'm sure plenty of people have mentioned that today. So I'll mention three that I'm really excited about. I'm excited about blockchain. I'm excited about, I guess you could call it the future of work, entrepreneurism, etc. And then the third is around health.
Okay.
So those are the three that I'm looking at the most, but definitely I'm looking at all software verticals. But I think within those three, I mean, just at a high level, I think with blockchain, there are so many applications in financial or marketplaces. I have this thesis around, there are a lot of businesses where there's a marketplace and basically a dumb middleman in between just taking a big cut. There's no reason for that. And that's actually a little bit less about blockchain and more about cryptocurrency just in general. For blockchain, there are a number of decentralized applications that frankly I think nobody has really figured out yet, but there may be something there. So that's one category. Health, definitely seeing a lot of new health ideas, and I think that's a great thing for society overall. Certainly on the consumer side, you're seeing a lot more mental health types of applications and wellness types of applications. But on the enterprise side, one of our companies, for example, they have it's a VR application to help you with your chronic back pain called Karuna. And essentially taking what you used to do in the physical world at a chiropractor's office and doing it in the virtual world, doing the same exercises. And so I think you'll see some interesting applications in health and trying to improve health. And then the last category around the future of work, I mean, I think just the reality is big corporations are no longer stable. Like gone are the IBM days where they would take care of you for life. So people have been forced to essentially become their own entrepreneur. In many cases, you see the rise of freelancers, but also just in general, like even if you are not in software, you have to sell yourself. And you see influencers who do that and basically create a business for themselves. So what tools can help the freelancer or the micro entrepreneur? So those are the three areas that I'm most interested in.
Wonderful. Well, that's so exciting to hear how you're approaching that and what you're focusing on. For those of you that's watching this, thank you very much for joining us. We are here today at AccelerateOTT. We just sat down with Elizabeth Yin, co-founder of Hustle Fund. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your insight, and we look forward to you coming back over here and visiting us on a frequent basis.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Here we are at AccelerateOTT. You're watching Techcopia, and I am so fortunate because we are sitting down here with some amazing individuals. Two amazing, dynamic, very influential and go-getter ladies are here with me today, one of which is my co-host today, Megan Cornell, the founder and also CEO of Momentum Law, and then of course our speaker and showcase interviewee, yes, that flew down to come and see us, which is so great. Janice McDonald, CEO of the Beacon Agency, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. So Janice, you've done a lot of really, really important work with women entrepreneurship generally, but some really important work. So first of all, thank you for that on behalf of all entrepreneurs, let alone women entrepreneurs. But I was hoping you could tell us a bit about the study that you recently undertook about some of the challenges that female entrepreneurs face and how to deal with those challenges.
Okay, sure. So thank you both.
Absolutely.
Excited to be here. So yes, two national studies. So our first national study was in 2016, and that was in conjunction with Carleton University, so my company with Carleton University, funded by BMO, and we looked at women and their approach to risk. And I can tell you what we found there, which every woman entrepreneur like yourself will say, we are not risk adverse. So the outcome of this study really was myth busting. Okay, so this notion that women don't want to take chances, but the truth is they are ambitious and they want to grow their businesses. Okay, that's now. What are the challenges from 2016? And some of those are held over in 2018. Access to capital remains a challenge. We know this, so, full stop. So 2018, we released our study. And that focus was on innovation. And that too has had an important role to play because it was cited both in the US-Canada Council advisory work, both studies were, but more importantly, our focus on innovation helped to shape the Women Entrepreneurs strategy in the federal budget. So very exciting that we actually now have a women entrepreneur strategy in the federal budget, which we hadn't had before. So in terms of innovation and the challenges for women, so the typical definition of innovation is broad. Both the Canada 2020 and OECD definition, very broad. However, typically how innovation is thought of and used is innovation equals tech, tech equals innovation. So while that's true, the problem with it is if you look at women entrepreneurs, 90% of their businesses are in the service sector in Canada. So there's this notion that women entrepreneurs are not innovative, and nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, of course, they are innovating in every aspect of their business. As one female entrepreneur said to us, if you don't innovate, you die. Now that the consequences of this are that women entrepreneurs are not seen as innovative, therefore they're not able to, for example, access grants, innovation grants. They're not typically going to be found in your accelerators and incubators unless they take a tech-forward approach. Even though their businesses are tech-enabled and tech is running throughout their business, obviously, right? You can't be in business pretty much today without having a tech focus. So that's the challenge in a nutshell. There's more. Access to capital remains a challenge. Sexism is alive and well. We heard lots of problems, but also we heard a lot of resilience of our Canadian women entrepreneurs.
And I think that's what we love about someone like yourself and just opening up this conversation and saying, listen, we know this is happening. You are busting a lot of these myths. You are having these conversations, and I think there is definitely a shift taking place on so many levels. And I know yourself and Megan is the same, really driving this forward. And I mean, we have a beautiful conference like this today at AccelerateOTT, and there is so many strong, innovative entrepreneurs here.
Of course.
But how do you feel like? What would you recommend to anybody that's watching this, that comes to a conference like this or is engaged in opportunities to connect with an ecosystem like this? How do you think they should leverage something like an AccelerateOTT?
Right. So the first thing is you have to come, right?
Step number one.
Like truly, you have to come because
jump on that plane.
Yeah, you do, because we know, for example, you need lifelong learning, right? The speed of change is relentless, so you need to hear big ideas from people presenting new ways of approaching business. So that's the first thing. Secondly, we know that networks are incredibly important for women entrepreneurs. So an opportunity like this here today to be able to expand your network, have those conversations. And frankly, the other challenge that we heard from our research is around information. So even though we think that everybody knows what's actually available, they don't, right? Just because it's on the website doesn't mean that the entrepreneur knows, oh, that grant is for me, or this opportunity exists for me. So making those connections are vitally important. And we know, for example, if I reference again our 2016 study, in terms of what women entrepreneurs are seeking, it's to have a relationship with their financial institution. So they want their banker to understand their business. Well, part of that also is coming to places where maybe your banker also is, right? That they're hanging out here too, and they're seeing like, oh, here's an engaged person, really part of the whole entrepreneurial ecosystem. That's how you get that information. That's how you make those connections. That's also, you strengthen those ties, and then new opportunities, happen. Again, if I reference our 2018 national study, partnerships and collaboration are vitally important for women entrepreneurs. And so coming to a place like this, you're going to sit down beside somebody and have a fantastic conversation, and then who knows where it leads.
Of course.
Right? Yeah. So strengthening those ties, gaining new insights and perspective, access to additional information. I just saw that Michael Tremblay's here, obviously.
So here we are at Accelerate OTT. You're watching Techcopia. McDonald, CEO of the Beacon Agency, and of course my co-host Megan Cornell from Momentum Law. The government,
Yes.
how are they
Yes.
adapting to this
Yes.
change? Because I
Yes.
think you're pushing forward,
Yeah.
the ecosystem is
Yeah.
pushing forward. Question is, are
Yeah.
we moving the
Yeah.
big wheel, and how can we
Yeah.
move that wheel faster?
Yeah, so I think they're doing an amazing job, frankly. Very exciting. If I reference budget 2018, money set aside, real commitment in terms of BDC. So we saw that EDC as well. There's a focus on dollars for our trade commissioners, which is a remarkable service that any Canadian entrepreneur can access for free, which is unlike other countries. And so if I think about what I heard as we went across the country and we talked to 146 women entrepreneurs, and then beyond that, just in the entrepreneurial ecosystem as a whole, this feels different. If I think about 2 weeks ago, as an example, I was in Toronto where with Minister Champagne, who hosted a roundtable with women entrepreneurs, about 20, and because they had just signed a trade deal with Israel. And so here we are, there's 20 women entrepreneurs from different regions in the country having an important discussion about trade and opportunities. And I thought, and many of us in that room, and on that personal side said, this feels different, this looks different, this is different. So I'm personally very encouraged.
Wonderful. That's amazing. Well, that's great news. So for those of you that's joining us, thank you very much. Thank you so much, Janice, for being here today. Thank you for sharing your insights. Thank you for the amazing work that you do.
Thank you.
And we look forward to being part of this, pushing it forward, and also making some real change happen and having a room full of amazing innovators just continuing to grow.
Accelerating. That's what we want.
Exactly.
In OTT.
I know. In OTT right here. So thank you very much for joining us. Stay tuned. Welcome to Techcopia. If you're watching this, yes, we are continuously adding to the lineup for today. Amazing speakers. I'm joined here today by my co-host Megan Cornell from Momentum Law. And with us now, we have Chris Hively from Techstars. Chris, thank you for coming all the way down to the amazing, vibrant, and I'm sure just overwhelmingly polite Ottawa. Thank you for
emphasis on polite.
Exactly. Thank you for joining us today. But we're here to talk business, and that's what we are here today to really showcase. And we're so glad to have someone like yourself that once again gets into these deep conversations with companies. Now, starting MapQuest almost 25 years ago, starting a company that 25 years ago and starting a company now. I'd love to know what you are looking for, maybe even what has changed. What has changed in that whole process in starting a company?
Everything.
Done. The question answered. Okay, moving on. Yes.
It's really funny because I'll have first time or new entrepreneurs, founders come to me and say, you did an amazing thing with MapQuest. I'd love to pick your brain on lessons learned or tips and tricks. And I say, there's no you can't. It's like asking your father, it's like your father's Oldsmobile kind of thing. It's completely different. I mean, I'll give you one example. There were no such thing as data centers back then. We were buying servers, and they sat in the last cubicle in the back of a cubicle farm, and all daisy chained to the same electrical outlet. That's everything is completely different. So no comparison, but I actually think it's both easier and harder today to start a company. Easier because you can get the product quicker. Harder because you're lots of competition for people trying to find and get access into each one of our brains. Right?
Absolutely.
So I know our clients who are looking for money want to hear from you. What do you look for? What really sets you alight when you first meet a company? And is there anything that makes you kind of hesitate when you're looking at a new investment?
Well, I believe as a good investor, you start with no, and people have to convince you to go to yes. And I think a lot of people raising money forget that. They think they have yes, and as long as they don't screw up, right, that they'll be in, and I think the water flows the other direction. So recognizing that, I believe, is really crucial. The other thing is that, you know, it may be intellectual, we may be looking for certain things, but I think a lot of investors, especially good investors, want to find a connection with the person that they're going to invest in. This is a journey that we're going to go on, and I have to want to work with you. And so for different investors, it may be different things. For me, I want to see that the person thinks like I think. Not that we're clones of each other, but that we kind of tackle problems in a similar fashion. Because I want to make sure that my brain is going to fit with what you need. And if you don't think like I do, then that, you know, we're going to run into trouble, right? And then the value that I'm supposedly going to deliver more than capital becomes meaningless. And so I'm really trying to find out what your personality's like, how do you think, how do you like to tackle problems? And for me personally, I like people who love to get lots of data and like to get lots of input and ask people questions and ask, how do you think about this? And how do you think about this? And then take all that and make really good decisions. So I'm looking for that process, that kind of mind.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and so to follow on that, though, it's not necessarily that if it's not a fit with you and that company, that company is going to be unsuccessful. So they shouldn't take a rejection from one investor as, I've got it all wrong. Because your point is, it's about you and the company fitting, and there could be a better fit for them out there.
Well said. And by the way, if one no or one kind of set of questions gets you off you're probably not a fit to be a long-term entrepreneur, right? I was just talking to a friend of mine. I live in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, who got 142 no's. Now, from that, he's learned that his company is actually before its time, and that in his market it hasn't matured to a point where he should be able to raise money. But 142 times he's approached investors. You know, it is a journey, and one of the first pieces of advice I give an entrepreneur is, well, come back to me when you've talked to 8 or 10 investors, because with 8 or 10, you'll start to maybe see some trends. You'll start to see some similar questions or some furrowed brows that they don't understand one aspect. Either means that you have to explain it better, or that something's wrong that maybe you need to fix. But certainly not one investor. But yeah, get used to the no's.
Absolutely, and I'd love to know what you think, because it sounds to me sometimes, many times, when companies go out there, they're cautious in approaching. They have a good product, but they're cautious in saying, listen, I need to get some sales under my belt, absolutely, to try and validate my product. But I don't want to talk to an investor and blow that opportunity, not being in the right space just yet to showcase them. But isn't it true so many times that when you need to have those conversations, as you just said, to realize, where am I in my developing process? Am I almost there, or is there still work to be done? Because a no now doesn't mean a no in 6 months or a year from now. Yeah, well said. And I encourage founders to get out early with investors, even if those investors, even if either they know or they feel that investor invests a little bit later down the road. Start building a relationship. I liken finding your investor as like finding your spouse or your mate, right? Very few of us, raise your hand, if you met and consummated your relationship, including marriage, all in the same day, right? Yeah. So, you're not going to walk in and close them that day. Yeah. Build a relationship. Yeah. What you'll find is that someone will say, you know what? The questions they'll ask will say, they like to see you when you have 10 customers, not at 0. Yes. So, you put them in the back of your mind, put them on your B list, and say, I'm going to keep them up to date. And at some point, when I get my 6th or 7th, maybe they'll awaken and maybe they'll be ready. Yeah. So, a good founder is spending a good portion of their time always managing their relationships, building them so that they're ready, hopefully, to make a connection when it's the right time. Now, we have a little bit of time with you, so I'm going to ask you one more quick question. And the question is, what do you think is the biggest mistake that companies make when they get funding? Because I think sometimes companies are really like, I just want to get money, I want to get money, and now I get my money, and now what?
Get a beer can.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What do we do now? What do you feel is that, what is the biggest mistake that they make? It's going out and hiring lots of people. Okay. Right? When they're not really ready for it. And I've seen it so many times that I
don't want to see it again. And it's a natural thing. And by the way, investors don't help this. Investors like, I just gave you all the money, now grow. And grow usually means either, you know, hiring people or spending a bunch of money on Facebook ads, right? And you got to know that money's never coming back. And I need to know I want to know how that person's actually going to move the needle tomorrow. And if you can't answer that question for me, then I'm going to tell you it's too soon to hire the people. So just because you have the money doesn't mean you should spend it.
Okay, love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's such a pleasure in having you, Chris from Techstars, that's joined us here, and once again, the hub of tech that's happening here in Canada. We're so happy to have you here at Accelerate OTT. Thank you very much to Megan Cornell, my co-host from Momentum Law, and we look forward in seeing you hopefully here in Ottawa more frequently as well.
Ottawa.
Go Ottawa.
Ottawa.
Thank you, guys. Interviews continue, and we are here now sitting down with the CEO of Invest Ottawa. This is a big day for you. It's AccelerateOTT 2018. You're watching Techopia, and I'm here joined by my co-host from Momentum Law, Megan Cornell. Michael, it's been an amazing day so far. It's just been a few hours really, but the vibrancy is amazing. It's contagious, and we are so excited to be here and just really embrace this day of what it creates for this ecosystem and of course Ottawa.
Yeah, it really does bring everyone together. So very excited with the start, and really love this year's agenda because it really is all around all the stages of taking companies from the very beginnings all the way through to global scale up. So I think it's fantastic.
Perfect.
So no matter what stage you're at, you're here today, you're excited, you're an entrepreneur, you're inspired by the amazing lineup of speakers. You leave tomorrow, and we were already warned, you know, don't let it end with just a couple LinkedIn connections.
Right.
What is your advice as a very experienced entrepreneur yourself to carry this forward for the attendees today and really make the most out of having come today?
So the learnings from all of the event, as you go through each of the areas, there's so many nuggets of great ideas that could be applied. Just listening to Andrew this morning, you know, with all of the trials and tribulations he's had from Celtic all the way through to his current company. It's just great to see what he's been able to do. And so taking those learnings, jotting them down, taking them with you, so many opportunities for people to network, get close. But there's a lot of self-organized communities in Ottawa. I don't know whether you realize how many there are that happen weekly. So AccelerateOTT is a great event. It's one of many we do in the year. It's our big one. But at Bayview Yards, we actually have 10 different self-organized meetup groups like Machine Learning, AI Ottawa. There's a blockchain group, DEF CON, all these different organizations. When they come to Bayview, they fill the place. And so there's so many opportunities to keep the dialogue going. It doesn't have to end here. But definitely the networking is critical here. So I would make sure it's not just exchanging cards, it's striking that conversation that gets you that next level conversation, because AccelerateOTT brings some great minds together. So tap into it, right?
Now, it's once again just the amount of information that's shared today, and as you say, the amount of connections that's being created today. What do you feel from just excitement in your head? What do you feel is the thing that you really feel, you know, this is what's happening in the Ottawa tech scene. Here's what I feel passionate about and what we can really make a change in happening.
Yeah, that's great. So firstly, the overwhelming sale out of this event is a good proof positive thing. We also had a new methodology that we've rolled in our incubator. We had 100 people apply to join our incubator, 100 companies, right? Like, these sorts of things really bode well. They give you that underpinning feeling like things are really happening here. But I would probably go to some of my opening comments. So we've really done a ton of work on planning, and I'm not talking surface planning. We had stakeholder groups from across different parts of the city, different areas. We came up with a plan that's a good plan, and the execution of the plan includes getting to the next level of detail. And so getting into 4 thematic areas, I can't tell you the whole story yet, we'll do it in the fall, but just talking about GovTech in a city that spends billions of dollars on technology. This government has got energy around modernizing, but they also have energy around developing SMEs, because the Canadian government knows the importance of SMEs in Canada's economy. So being here in the capital city where all that's happening, that's an opportunity for everyone here in the city. And it doesn't mean you have to be only focused on government, but boy, you can get references and a cash flow by tapping into that market right here. So this is a government that's open for business. So there's that one. Healthcare is huge too. Like we really do have an opportunity. And between now and when the Ottawa Hospital opens up their new campus, it's probably 7, 8, 9 years. They have energy on innovation. They've just hired a new VP of Innovation, Alan Forster, Dr. Alan Forster. He has got big ideas. So there's one to watch as well. When I talk smart cities, even if I take one little sliver of it and talk about autonomous vehicles story for Ottawa is hitting all major markets. I mean, I personally spent more than a week in China. We hit so many different organizations, and every single one of them we highlighted and underscored the AV capability. And we have companies coming here to check out what's happening in Ottawa because we are in a very good position to compete there. So that's just one little sliver of smart cities, but a very important one. Like that's one that I think we can be a major global player and leader in. And then finally, precision ag. We're only scratching the surface on that one. When we did our research, our analysis, that one has probably some of the best potential we've got, and we're only marginally involved in it now. So as we push deeper into it and we lever all those different disruptive tech areas that we have, man, that's a really good opportunity for us.
That's a lot of things to be excited about.
It is, and it's only 4, but you know what? We're small, and for us to punch above our weight, we need to lean in on 4, and we're going to do a big job in each one of them, and more on that in the fall. So we have some branding planned and some launch stuff planned. But for today, just that little sneak peek for everyone here at AccelerateOTT and for your viewers, these are big deal areas for us. And I really do think that as a community, we come together, we can build companies to compete in all those areas, and we can attract companies to land here to compete with us in those areas. In the end, we end up punching above our weight as a result of that strategy. So it's at the core of our strat plan, but we're at the next level of detail.
I love it. And
Yeah.
I love the fact that it's the second time now that we hear that our city is punching above its weight, and we want to continue to do that. And if you're watching this, we are at AccelerateOTT 2018. We are here with the CEO of Invest Ottawa, which along with his team has made this event happen. And it really is a great opportunity to kind of build some momentum on all the things that we're working on, and especially those 3 themes that you just mentioned, but also just for yourself, what do you feel if you're out there today and you're standing in front of them, and you know this event is grown a lot, only just over a few years, but maybe you can share with me, how do you think an event like this, and specifically AccelerateOTT, is really impacting the ecosystem, and maybe what you want to see moving forward?
You know, I think it's the messaging that happens. You come to an event like this, and it's not just the event, it's the energy in the event. Something's happening in Ottawa. This to me feels like the mid-90s when we were all over the telecom sector. I mean, my 2 brothers during that period worked at Nortel. Late in the 90s, I ended up at JDS Uniphase. The buzz in the city at that point was undeniably strong. Like, we were global leaders in a few markets. What's different now is we're actually in multiple areas. So in a world of specialization, we can compete in a lot of areas. So it's the energy that you glean from it. I feel it from an event like this because we've brought everybody together. And this isn't the only event that happens during the year where you feel it. So I'm feeling it all year at Bayview. It's such an exciting spot. This sort of brings everyone in one place where we can really talk about it and plot our strategy in global markets. So that to me is the takeaway. It's just that feeling, that excitement that exists in Ottawa. We're a tier 2 city, but we're competing above a tier 2 level, in my opinion. And what an opportunity for all of us.
Love it, love it, love it. So thank you so much for joining us today, Michael. We really appreciate it. For those of you watching, make sure that you stay tuned. And if you haven't done so already, make sure that you engage with AccelerateOTT, not just coming up in future years, but also after this event, because there'll be a lot of content that'll be shared throughout it, and an opportunity, if you're attending the event, to really reconnect with everybody that's here. So thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Here we go. We are continuing to just add to the slew of information we have today. Yeah, I know, so much information. And if you're watching this, you're watching Techopia, and we are here at AccelerateOTT. I'm here today with my co-host, Megan Cornell from Momentum Law, and joining us now, traveled a great distance to be here with us, Salim Chowdhury, a partner at 500 Startups. We are so happy to have you here, and we are so pumped to get into the questions with you a little bit and hear what you think of what's happening in business, startups, and also, of course, from an investing perspective.
Great to be here.
Yeah, so thank you for coming all this way to talk to us in wonderful Ottawa. And thank you, first of all, for the work that you guys do. I think it's amazing. So many great companies have gone through 500 Startups. So on that note, you've seen a lot. You've seen a lot of companies come through. When you get a really high potential company that comes in, what are some of the standard problems or encumbrances to them really scaling that you see? So they've got a lot of potential, but where do they stall in that scaling process?
I guess so. The number one thing that they struggle with is that as you scale and grow, who your first audience customer base were will not be the same as your second audience base. And there's almost a, how can I say, a hope that nothing ever changes. It works. I've got something that works. It's making money. They're coming through. And then this next wave, they're going to be different. And sometimes that difference isn't naturally in the company. It's not in the DNA of the founders. It's not something that they naturally empathize with. And so learning that empathy, being able to be malleable enough, being able to be humble enough to be able to go, you know what? I have no clue what to do next. I'm going to go out and speak to my customers. I'm going to reach out to them. I'm going to have a conversation with them. Let me understand how do they perceive the pain? Because the biggest challenge in scaling, actually, another way of paraphrasing it, is actually, how do I be a good servant? Because founders often, dare I say, there's the faux cult of Steve Jobs of, I'm Steve Jobs, I know what everybody wants. I'm Jeff Bezos, I know what everyone wants. Ironically, Jeff Bezos doesn't. He's the richest man in the world because he's the most customer-centric man on the earth. His business is hyper-customer-centric. They do everything based on data and conversations. And that data isn't just numbers. It can be garnered from interviews. It can be garnered from speaking with the clients. It's from the qualitative feedback as well. And so that's the challenge in scaling. That next wave will be different. So how do I actually work with that different audience? I get to know them by having really solid interviews and understanding not why do they like my product or not why they like my product, but how do they solve the pain that I currently have? How are they doing it now? What's good about it? What do they dislike about it? And then being humble enough to be able to take that and go, you know what? I need to change some stuff. I need to alter the way we're working. And that to me is the secret sauce.
So pivoting, which of course is a word that we love to talk about in the startup world, but pivoting based on, yeah, absolutely, but based on empathy, which isn't a word we always hear thrown around in the startup world. So that's really interesting.
Feelings are everything. Like, I know it sounds a bit stupid, but if you don't have empathy with your customer, if you don't feel for them, you're never going to actually sell to them, because the reality is almost all decisions are made emotionally first and they're rationalized second. You're wearing an Apple Watch right now. You bought that Apple Watch probably because you like the idea of it, you like the perception of it, and then you post-rationalized it probably by going, well, it'll help me keep fit. It'll help me be more mindful. How often do you use the mindfulness function? Probably not as much as you'd like to admit. So we are on camera after all. So, I mean, there is this harsh reality.
Yeah.
And so let's understand this reality and call a spade and work with it.
I love that. And, just tying into that from a scaling perspective, I love the way you just mentioned that your customers now might not be your customers when you really scale, but now you have to look at your customers differently, but you also have to look at your culture differently. You also have to look at your staff differently and how to motivate them. So maybe I'll pass the mic to you. And how do you try and navigate through that as a CEO or as a founder?
I mean, the company culture thing is, ironically, I often think it's a red herring question, is the honest answer. So the whole problem with company culture is that it is, by its own nature, it should be molding and shaping to that of the customers that you have. There should never be a fixed culture as such. There are some fixed values that you need to have, but that's not the same as the culture. Because in reality, unless you're being a good servant to your customers and having a culture that mirrors the idea of good service to the largest customer set or the different customer sets you're doing, there is no way you're going to reach the potential and, more importantly, build that customer loyalty. And I know I sound like a nut job going on and on about customers and feelings and doing what's right for them, but it sounds ridiculous. That is the primary difference between a company that raises Series B and exits properly and a company that raises Series B and dies, in my experience. The ones that die are obsessed with the CEO's vision. They're obsessed with, like, this is what we're building, the change we're doing. It's like, no, do what your customer goddamn wants. So the culture is malleable, and that's the first mistake people make. Don't change. Secondly, they don't allow, the founders don't actually immerse themselves as much as they should do through the rest of the company. Because, I'm too busy now, I've got to fundraise, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. You know what? Sometimes you need to spend like a couple of days a week on the shop floor. Actually, you've got armies of teams who can manage it. But unless you're spending that time, helping them understand, showing that you actually care, and showing the way that you respond, and role modeling the behavior, you're going to fail. And that's the one thing that I feel like senior teams, this is where I think a lot of sort of the Series B fund managers, this is where if they can do a huge improvement on, actually focusing on or helping upskill the founders they're investing with that understanding of they need to how to be great role models, and what good role modeling looks like and how to portray that, because that's actually a huge weakness. And the problem is a lot of them have pure finance backgrounds, so they're not used to the operational requirements of all the boring, soft, cuddly, feely, touchy stuff. But it makes the difference.
We are in that world today where you want to feel a part of something as a team, and it's sometimes more important that it's not always the money that drives you, and it's not...
In a startup, the money can never drive you. Look, you're being paid under market salary. You're being given these, share options, which nobody knows what they actually are going to become. Half the bankers don't know, let's be quite frank and honest. And so why are we doing it? Because it's the people that are around us. That's what, nobody leaves their... if there are good people around you, and your manager's good to you, and you're working on a problem that you actually care about, or you're working on something that actually is vaguely interesting to you, you will stay. The money, you know what? It only makes a difference if there are other better things out there. It's a competitive landscape. So, startups have to think wisely about this.
And maybe just a last question for you. How important is it for you, looking from a investment perspective, looking at diverse companies from a founder perspective and teams, and keeping that, once again, just variety in the way you approach companies, and how important is that aspect for you?
So for me personally, it's why I work at 500 Startups. We are the world's most active investor, but more importantly, the most diverse. Most of our investments are outside Silicon Valley. Most of our founders are diverse by one traditional diversity metric. It's something like 60-ish%. I'm not 100% sure, but I should know this better. Over 30. I think it's about 30. Depends on the batches, but between 30 to 40% of our founders are women. It's in our DNA, and by looking for the other, there's a commercial advantage to it as an investor. You get better value deals, because unfortunately, half the world are a bunch of idiots who just are like, oh, well, I don't look the cut of her jib. It's just like, oh, come on, what the hell is it? And so there's that element to it, which is that you can actually, arguably, diversity is a great way of getting better returns, because you're often looking for stuff that other people aren't looking at and helping them accelerate and thrive by giving them competitive advantages, because you, as a fund, are able to help them with growth processes, with scaling processes, etc. But then there's the other side to it, which is that undiverse companies struggle to succeed in international markets. You're building here in Ottawa, for example. You're not building just for Ottawa.
No.
Right? Same with London. Nobody builds just for London. You build for the world. And having that diverse set of views, opinions, and understandings, I'm going to sound cliched, but it's not just a nice to have. How are you going to understand? How are you going to empathize? How are you going to get that customer feeling? How are you going to be able to actually interview somebody if you can't empathize with them? Say you're selling, say you're a stereotypical Stanford MBA. How are you going to empathize with the guy who is driving a car on a car sharing on a taxi type service? I'm not sure whether Travis Kalanick actually went to Stanford or not, but look at how he screwed up. His lack of empathy, that lack of diversity has killed what should have been a great company. I mean, it's emancipating in so many ways. It's socially positive in so many ways. Like in my hometown of London, the drivers on Uber were treated horribly by these evil sort of like small little minicab companies. And now they've been freed because a computer decides. They're not having to call for favors, not having to do anything. But it's so powerful. But then the founder could not empathize. He didn't have a team around him who could stop him from saying, "What the hell are you doing?" And as a result, this business, which should be so positively socially transformative and could be even more value, the opportunity's been lost. Can you imagine if Uber had their current CEO, a man who is humble, who has clearly got better empathy skills? It would have been public a long time ago. And that to me is like a sign of, if you want the textbook case for why diversity matters, just look at Uber.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. Very unique, and I love it. And that's what I love about this event. So it brings so many amazing speakers like yourself and influencers and just thought leaders to the table. And I think it's so important for this ecosystem right here, because I think, and I'm sure you'll hear that resounding message throughout the day, all and everybody here knows what Ottawa is capable of and what our companies here are capable of, and we want to grow this, and everybody's ready for that.
Honestly, it reminds me a lot of the challenges London faced 10, 15 years ago. No shortage of talent, no shortage of drive. Let's be honest, this is Canada. You can quit your job and you're not going to die. You're not going to be able to worry about. You don't have to worry about healthcare for your family, right? The social structures are there, the education structures are there, but the challenge is, how do we build a society and a community that is supportive, that doesn't laugh at you for doing this, and more importantly, and this is the reason why I flew over here and why it's like such an honor for me to be here, it's helping share with other people what good looks like. In the Valley, you want to hire a CFO, there are about 6 CFOs you can speak to tomorrow. You want to hire a lawyer, there are 10 lawyers who've done all the deals, etc. Here, there are fewer lawyers. There are fewer CFOs, there are fewer of everything. So it's harder to work out what good looks like. So the thing I love about what I get to do at 500, and I love about this conference and the people it's brought together, we're helping show Ottawa what not local good, Ottawa good is like, but what global good is like. And if Ottawa gets global good, it then becomes a world-class place to build and grow and thrive. And if we can help drive that forward, and we can help drive places like this, which are totally undervalued, then I think it's something we're doing that's totally positive for society.
Love it.
And that's what gets me excited.
Love it, love it. Well, we're excited, and we're already, like, just your energy is so contagious. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me
for being with us today. And for those of you that's watching, thank you very much for joining us here at AccelerateOTT. Thank you for joining us on Techopia. Thank you so much to my co-host, Megan Cornell from Momentum Law, which is also a lawyer, which is wonderful. So we're getting them more together. And thank you so much, Salim, for joining us today. Thank you for traveling down, and thank you for sharing your insights, and we look forward to making you come and visit us more frequently.
I would love to. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much.
Hey bro, go for what you know. Bass getting low and we rock the show. Hey bro, go for what you know. Bass getting low and we rock the show.